So, protocol. Your toxic boss isn't the problem. You are. Because every time you use empathy to excuse their behavior, every time you work the weekend to fix their manufactured crisis, you are actively subsidizing the psychopathy of the machine. Society teaches us that hard work and communication can fix a broken manager. This is a corporate lie. Human resources is not a hospital for broken leaders. It is a legal defense mechanism designed to protect the predator, not the prey. You cannot heal a machine designed to consume your sanity. You can only learn how to starve it. Their unreasonableness is not a temporary lack of control. It is a carefully calibrated mechanism of absolute control. They keep you in a perpetual state of hypervigilance because a terrified employee is an infinitely compliant employee. Consider the anatomy of the Friday afternoon crisis that they manufacture out of absolutely nothing. There is no actual emergency. The emergency is a psychological test of your unconditional surrender to their will. When they send the aggressive email filled with subtle threats and deliberate, engineered ambiguity, they are not looking for a solution to the problem. They are looking for your emotional reaction. They want the apology. They want the frantic justification. They want to see you sweat, because your anxiety is the only currency that validates their pathetic, empty sense of authority. This dynamic is not a professional relationship. It is a textbook trauma bond disguised as a career track. They break you down with sudden cruelty, and then they offer you a tiny crumb of praise, and your starved, exhausted brain interprets that breadcrumb as an act of profound, life-saving mercy. You are trapped in a Skinner box of abuse, pressing the lever over and over again, praying for validation. But the machine is empty. The Human Resources Department will not save you from this nightmare. Human Resources exists to protect the institution from liability, not to protect your psychological integrity from the institution. If the toxic boss produces revenue, their psychopathy is classified by the board as an eccentric leadership style. You are entirely alone. Your empathy is your greatest vulnerability in a room full of emotional cannibals. The ancients understood the terrifying reality of serving a king whose mind has fractured into paranoia. They understood that you cannot cure the deep rot of another human being with your own compliance. The Latin root is Invidia. We translate it weakly as envy, but its literal meaning is to look maliciously. The toxic boss does not hate you for your flaws. They cast the evil eye upon you because of your competence. Your quiet capability is a mirror that constantly reflects their own terrifying inadequacy back at them. In the first book of Samuel, we find the ultimate psychological profile of the toxic leader, King Saul. Saul was consumed by a dark, terrifying spirit. His leadership was defined by extreme paranoia and unprovoked rage. The king did not sleep. The king paced the cold stone floors of the palace, convinced that every shadow was an assassin. This is the psychological reality of the toxic leader. They are trapped in a prison of their own profound insecurity. Every successful project delivered by a subordinate is not viewed as a victory for the kingdom, but as a direct threat to the fragile throne. To soothe the madness of the king, they brought in a young shepherd named David to play the harp. David was excellent at his job. He was loyal, he was capable, and he produced undeniable, tangible results. But excellence does not cure paranoia. Excellence amplifies the paranoia of the incompetent leader. As David played the music beautifully, Saul did not thank him. Saul picked up a heavy iron spear, and, with absolute malice, the king hurled the spear at the wall, attempting to pin David to the stone. This is the exact moment where modern corporate advice fails completely. Modern advice tells you to communicate. Modern advice tells you to sit down with Saul and use I feel statements to express your boundaries. David did not attempt to schedule a feedback session with the man who was actively trying to murder him. David did not take the attack personally, nor did he assume that playing the harp harder would fix it. He simply dodged the spear. He survived the immediate attack. And then, he left the palace forever. You cannot heal a king who wants to kill you. You can only refuse to be his target. The Stoic defense against the toxic boss requires the total eradication of your own emotional availability. The psychology of the parasite is simple. A parasite cannot survive without a living host. Your boss feeds on your anxiety, your defensive explanations, and your desperate attempts to appease their anger. When you fight back, you feed them. When you cower and apologize, you feed them even more. The only way to starve the monster is to become entirely inedible. The only defense is to become the gray rock. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control the actions of the tyrant, we control our reaction to him. The Stoic philosopher was born a slave. He understood structural abuse better than any modern management consultant ever could. He realized that the master could chain his leg, but the master could never touch his sovereign mind without permission. The modern tyrant in the corner office demands that permission daily. They demand that the employee bleeds anxiety for them. They demand that the employee carries the psychological weight of the department. To practice the gray rock is to revoke that permission permanently. It is the conscious decision to become as uninteresting, as unresponsive, and as emotionally barren as a stone on the ground. When the stone is kicked, it does not scream. It does not apologize to the boot. It merely remains exactly what it is, a heavy, silent, immovable object that offers absolutely zero friction. Narcissists are addicted to friction. They require the spark of conflict to feel alive, to distract themselves from their internal void. When the boss launches an unhinged, emotionally charged attack, the only effective response is to visualize a heavy glass wall dropping between you. You strip all tone, all inflection, and all defensive posturing from your voice. The tone becomes absolutely flat. If they accuse you of a failure, do not launch into a passionate defense of your hard work. Respond only with brutal, logistical facts. The report was submitted at 4 p.m. I will resend it. This extreme neutrality is terrifying to the narcissist. It deprives them of the chaotic friction they desperately crave. They will push harder at first, trying to break the stone, trying to find the emotional trigger. The line is held. Their rage crashes against the silence like water breaking against a cliff. Eventually, the parasite will realize that the host is dead, and they will seek easier prey elsewhere. You do not need to defeat Saul in combat. You only need to stop playing the harp for him. The return to the office is no longer a return to the hunt. The employee becomes a sovereign observer, watching a fundamentally broken machine tear itself apart from the inside. The toxic workplace relies on the delusion of indispensability. The employee believes that if they just work harder, if they stay later, the system will eventually recognize their sacrifice and reward them. This is a mathematical impossibility. A system designed for extraction does not suddenly transform into a system of cultivation. The vampire does not eventually decide to become a vegetarian just because the victim offers a higher quality of blood. The only logical maneuver is to sever the supply line entirely, to punch the clock at 9, to execute the contracted tasks with clinical precision, and to punch out exactly at 5. No extra miles, no weekend emails, no voluntary psychological bleeding. The boss will notice the change. They will feel the sudden absence of the desperate energy they use to consume daily. They will escalate. They will manufacture emergencies to test the perimeter. When the next manufactured crisis occurs and the boss demands emotional submission, the response is the 10-second delay, a weapon of mass psychological destruction. After the rant finishes, there is no immediate speech, only a direct, unbroken gaze. 10 seconds pass. In the mind, slowly. The silence stretches out until it becomes physically unbearable for the aggressor. They expect immediate defense. Absolute silence forces them to sit alone with their own unhinged behavior. When speech finally occurs, the voice drops to the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Monotone, factual, empty. I understand the deadline. The data will be delivered at 3. Nothing more. No apology, no explanation. The emotional labor is withdrawn entirely. The employee becomes the impenetrable wall that their spears cannot pierce. The true tragedy of the modern workplace is not that toxic bosses exist. It is the voluntary endurance of them. The illusion that madness can be fixed if one just absorbs enough of the poison. But the palace of King Saul is already burning, and no amount of beautiful music will put out the fire. The only question that remains, sitting across from the person trying to destroy peace of mind, why is the harp still being played?